I walked in and felt the damp air cling to my jacket. The hall was dark, and I could hear the rain outside, drumming on the roof. No one expected me. I was supposed to come home 3 days later. I'd wanted it to be a surprise. I'd imagined a small laugh, maybe a hug, then just a quiet evening on the couch. That was my plan, nothing special, just a soft landing after a rough month away. I'd been on the border, doing my shift. I'm not active duty military, not exactly, but more like a long-time guard for those perimeter zones. It's routine work. You patrol, you watch, you write reports. I'd done 8 years of it, so it became part of who I am. My wife stayed behind in our hometown. She said she'd handle life here, the bills, the house, the yard. She said she was fine with me away. I believed her. We'd been married a good while, since our late 20s, and we'd had our share of ups and downs. But nothing too crazy, or so I thought. Anyway, I came home early. Didn't call ahead. I liked that feeling of opening the door and hearing her voice, seeing her eyes light up. The day before, I'd been thinking how it might go. I'd step in, say something like, "Guess who got off shift early?" Then we'd maybe share a quick laugh about it. She might tell me to get out of my boots so I wouldn't drag mud inside. Normal little things. It never happened that way. I remember pushing open the front door real slow. The hinges squeaked. A single light was on in the living room, but I didn't see her there. There was a faint glow from the bedroom. I figured she might be reading, or doing something quiet before bed. The rain made everything feel heavier, like the air itself had weight. I closed the door behind me, no slam, no noise. Then I saw the boots. They were big, caked in fresh mud. A man's boots. They stood there on the old rug by the entrance. I froze. The water dripped off my jacket, forming small puddles on the floor, but I barely noticed. A swirl of confusion and dread hit me. People always imagine they'd react with a shout, or they'd barge right into the bedroom. I didn't do either. I just stood there, listening. My heart was going crazy in my chest, but I couldn't move. The only thing I could think was that I recognized the mud. It was from our property, dark, almost black, and thick when it rained. I realized some other man had walked right in with that mud on his boots, leaving those lumps of dirt. That small detail hit me so hard. I think I stood there for a minute, not sure if I was breathing. Then I heard voices. Hers for sure. The other was deeper, but muffled. I was too far away to make out words. I wasn't even sure I wanted to understand. My stomach turned. I thought maybe it was something else, maybe a cousin visiting, or a repair guy stuck in the rain. But it was evening, close to bedtime, and something about the tone of their voices felt off. They were talking low, like people who are used to each other's company. Like there was an intimacy I recognized. I stepped out of my boots quietly. Slid them off, left them on the mat. I started moving down the hallway, slowly, my socks getting damp from the wet floor. The deeper I got into the house, the clearer the voices became. I heard a faint laugh from her, that soft sound she used to make after a private joke. My ears pounded with my own heartbeat. I wanted to be wrong, wanted the next few steps to prove me an idiot that I'd misheard. But then I reached the bedroom door. It was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see them. They were on our bed. I saw her face turned to the side. Saw him on top of her, braced on his elbows. I froze again. I recognized her voice, her body. She made the same quiet sounds I used to hear when we were close. I couldn't see his face right away, just a broad back and arms. He shifted a bit, and his hand cupped her cheek like he'd done it 100 times. That was the moment something inside me stopped. It was like I couldn't feel my own body. I was looking at them, and all I could sense was a kind of hollow ache in my chest. I didn't scream, I didn't call out. I just watched. I know it sounds crazy. But I couldn't pull myself away. I felt pinned to the floor by some force. They were so absorbed in each other they didn't notice me. The movement of their bodies, the hush in their voices, everything told me this wasn't a first-time fling. There was a comfort there, a routine. That hurt more than anything. I realized the entire time I was breathing in these shallow, ragged gulps. My legs were shaking, but I stayed. I don't know how long I stood there. 10 seconds, a minute, maybe more. I truly can't say. At some point, she turned her head just enough to glimpse me out of the corner of her eye. She gasped, a sharp intake of breath. The man jerked his head around, eyes wide. He looked at me with confusion that slid into terror. And I just stared back. I remember he moved to cover himself, and she pulled the sheet up in some reflex. But I still saw her bare shoulders, saw the flush on her cheeks. Heard her whisper my name in a trembling voice. I said nothing. My mouth felt like it was full of sand. My mind was cold, calm, but also numb. I backed out of the doorway, step by step, and turned toward the front. I didn't slam the bedroom door. I didn't push anything over or throw a punch. I just left. In the living room, I paused a second. Thought about taking my boots, but I left them where they were. Let the floor get muddy if it wanted. I opened the door and stepped outside. The rain hit my face, colder than before. I walked straight to my truck, got in, and started it. My hands on the steering wheel were shaking. I let out a breath I'd been holding the whole time. My mind was racing, but I don't remember any clear thoughts except that I had to get away. I pulled out of the driveway with my headlights off at first. Then I switched them on once I hit the main road, and I just kept driving. No plan, no destination in mind yet. I just needed air, space, something. For half an hour, I circled around the outskirts of town. Rain hammered the windshield. The wipers squeaked. I felt disconnected from my own body, like I was watching myself from above. I thought about so many things at once, the life we shared, the little routines we'd had, the times I missed her when I was away. It all churned into a dull roar in my head. Then an hour or so into this aimless drive, something in me snapped. I pulled over to the side of the road and parked on the muddy shoulder. I sat there, engine idling, and stared into the dark. My breath had gone shaky again, and my eyes stung, but I didn't cry. I don't think tears came. It was like an emptiness took over, but behind that emptiness was anger. A deep, pulsing anger I hadn't felt before. Not just at her, at him, at myself, at the whole situation. I thought about turning around and storming back into that bedroom, maybe do something violent. But I didn't do that. I'm not sure why. Maybe I didn't want to see them again. Maybe I knew I'd lose control, and a part of me was too tired to face the consequences of that. So I kept driving. After a while, I ended up in the parking lot of a little diner. It was closed, the lights off, but there was an overhang. I pulled in, killed the engine, and listened to the rain on the metal roof. I thought about calling someone, maybe an old friend, maybe my cousin out in another state. But it was late, and I had no words. What was I going to say? Hey, I just found my wife in bed with some guy, can you help me figure this out? It felt pointless. The anger built up inside me, even in that quiet moment. I pictured them again, the way he held her, how her face looked under him. The rage made my jaw clench so hard I got a headache. I started the truck again. My hands gripped the wheel, and I found myself turning back toward home without really deciding to. It was probably close to midnight when I pulled onto our road. I drove slowly, parked a block away, and walked the rest of the distance through the rain. My clothes got soaked. I didn't care. I didn't feel the cold. I went around the back of the house to the little shed where we keep the yard tools and the spare gas can for the lawnmower. Inside, I found a big jug of diesel. I also grabbed a heavy hammer from the tool rack. Everything was quiet except for the rain, hissing against the metal roof of the shed. My heart thumped in my ears, and I felt a strange calm setting in. I circled around to the front again. Her car was in the driveway. His was next to it, a battered truck, older model. Muddy tires, same mud as on those boots. I walked up to it, hammer in hand. Didn't hesitate. I smashed the headlights first, one, then the other. The glass shards scattered on the wet concrete. The noise felt too loud, like it might wake the whole street, but nobody came outside. The rain drowned out a lot of it. I moved to the side window, hit it with 2 heavy swings until it shattered. The door, the mirror, the hood, I lost track of how many times I swung. I just did it until I was out of breath. Then I popped the hood, poured diesel along the engine block, letting it flow down into whatever crevices it could find. Part of me wanted to light a match and watch it go up in flames, but I didn't. I felt my hand tremble on the gas can. I could smell diesel mixing with the wet night air. I just wanted him to feel scared when he saw it. Let him guess if I was going to torch it next time. I set the can down, took the hammer with me, and walked back inside the house. I expected the front door might be locked, but it wasn't. I stepped in. Silence. I moved down the hall. The bedroom door was closed now. I didn't open it. I walked to our bathroom, that little cramped space with a shower stall and a small sink. On the sink was a bar of soap in a dish. I slipped off my wedding ring, that metal band I'd worn for so long it had a groove in my finger. Took a pair of pliers from the cabinet. It took some effort, but I bent the ring, twisting it until the metal snapped. The ring was ruined, now just a broken piece of metal. I pressed it into the bar of soap, burying it halfway. Then I set the bar back in the dish. That was it. My wife must have been in the bedroom, maybe listening, maybe terrified. But she didn't come out. I heard no sound except my own breathing. I placed the pliers on the edge of the sink, looked at my face in the mirror, pale, wet hair plastered to my forehead, eyes half dead. I felt no satisfaction, no relief. Just a dull ache. I left the bathroom, walked back down the hall. She was crying softly now, I could hear that. I didn't open the door. Didn't speak to her. I just grabbed my truck keys off the table and left the house. Didn't slam the door. I got in my truck and drove away. I ended up at my father's old trailer, out on the edge of town by the fields. Nobody had lived there since he passed. It was dark, musty, smelled of mildew. But it was a roof over my head, and that's all I wanted that night. My clothes were soaked, my hands trembling from the hammer swings. I sank down on the worn-out couch in the living area and just stared at the ceiling. The storm raged outside, wind rattling the flimsy windows. My mind was blank, except for one image, them in my bed, his hand on her cheek. I stayed like that until morning. Didn't sleep. Didn't move. Didn't think. Just existed, like a statue. When I woke up, or came to, really, it was dawn. The rain had stopped, but everything outside was dripping in gray. I looked around the trailer. Dust covered the surfaces, empty boxes lay in corners. My dad's old tackle box was on a rickety table. He'd taken me fishing when I was a kid, back in a time when I thought the world made sense. I felt an urge to pick it up, open it, just to remember something good, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. My hands were sore, especially my right hand from clutching the hammer. I got up, found a half-used roll of paper towels, and tried to wipe some water off my jacket. Then I dug around until I found an old coffee pot in a cupboard. Managed to get it going with some stale grounds I found in a can. The smell of weak coffee filled the trailer. I stood there, sipping from a chipped mug, staring out the window at the gray sky. My mind was stuck on the memory of last night. That scene in my bedroom. Her crying. The ring jammed in the soap. The diesel dripping off his engine. I expected I'd feel regret or maybe shame for losing my temper. But I didn't. All I felt was emptiness and a simmering anger underneath. I was waiting for something else to kick in, some final wave of heartbreak. But it was just numb. I wondered if I'd done enough, or if I'd done too much. No real answer came. After a while, I drove back into town. Stopped by a gas station for a fresh coffee and some food. The clerk gave me a strange look, probably because I looked like a mess. I could see my reflection in the glass door, hair tangled, eyes bloodshot, clothes wrinkled. I didn't care. I paid and left without a word. Then I realized I couldn't go home. That house was no longer a place I recognized. The smell of betrayal clung to it in my mind. But I had to face her at some point, right? I decided I'd go by in the afternoon, see if she was still there. But I took my time, wandering around the outskirts of town. Stopped at a small park where I used to walk our old dog. He'd passed away a couple years ago, and we never got another. She'd said she wasn't ready. I wondered if that was true, or if I'd just never been home enough to share the responsibility. Eventually, I couldn't stall any longer. I pulled up to the house, saw her car in the driveway. His truck was gone. Or what was left of it. I saw shards of glass on the ground, a few scattered pieces of metal. Felt a flicker of dark satisfaction. I walked up to the porch. The door was closed, but not locked. Inside, everything was quiet. I stepped in, noticed my old boots by the doorway. The place smelled like damp wood and sorrow. She was sitting in the living room. She looked up when I walked in. Her eyes were red and puffy. She'd been crying. In her hand was the broken ring, the half that I'd pressed into the soap. She must have found it this morning, pried it out. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. We just looked at each other. Finally, she opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, tears welled up again, rolling down her cheeks. I stood there, not moving closer, not moving away. My chest felt tight, but no tears came from me. I just stared at her, remembering all the years we'd spent in this house. Christmases, birthdays, lazy Sundays. They all felt so far away now, like a dream that never happened. After a long stretch of silence, she managed a whisper. "I'm so sorry." I heard her words, but they didn't reach me. I turned away and walked to the kitchen. Opened the fridge, took out a beer. Usually I'd ask if she wanted one, but not this time. I popped the cap, drank half of it in one go. She followed me in, stopped a few steps behind, like she was afraid to come closer. Her voice shook when she spoke again. "I didn't mean. I never wanted it, just..." She trailed off. I knew she wanted me to fill the silence, but I didn't. I took another swig of beer, set the bottle down. I remember turning to face her, seeing how small she looked, arms folded around herself. She was in an old sweater, hair unwashed, face blotchy. She'd never looked so fragile. Part of me wanted to comfort her, an old habit. But the memory of her with him was too fresh. Too raw. She tried again. "Who told you to come home early?" She must have been wondering how her plan got ruined. Or maybe she was just looking for anything to say. I shrugged. No one told me. It just happened. I finished the beer, tossed the empty bottle in the trash. I could feel her eyes on me. She was waiting for me to explode, to accuse her, to do something. But I just didn't have the words. Finally, I walked past her, down the hall to the bedroom. The bed was made, fresh sheets. I wondered if she changed them right after I left. That thought made my stomach turn. I grabbed a few clothes from the dresser, stuffed them into a duffel bag. Nothing neat, just a random pile. She stood in the doorway, tears still streaming, a hand over her mouth. "Don't go," she whispered. "Please talk to me." I zipped the bag. My eyes flicked to her, then down at the floor. "There's nothing to say." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, flat. Then I brushed past her and walked out. I think she tried to grab my arm, but I stepped away. In the living room, I paused a second, looking at all the stuff we'd collected over the years, pictures on the wall, a lamp we bought on sale, the coffee table her uncle made. It was our life, laid out in these objects. Now it felt like someone else's home, not mine. She didn't follow me out to the driveway. I started the truck, backed away, and left. I drove straight to the trailer. Threw the bag on the couch, realized I had no plan after that. I just severed myself from the house, from my wife, from everything. But I didn't feel regret. I just felt a numb acceptance, like this was the only path left. For the next week or so, I slept in the trailer, using old blankets I found in a storage bin. I lived off canned food and takeout. I avoided people, avoided phone calls. I knew word would spread. It's a small town, and folks talk. But nobody came knocking. Maybe they sensed I wasn't in the mood. Maybe they just didn't care enough to interfere. My father's trailer had always been a kind of place people avoided, old, creaky, on a patch of land that was half swamp whenever it rained. Good for me, I guess. Some nights, though, I'd take a drive by the house, real slow, lights off. I'd see the windows lit up, sometimes see a silhouette inside. Never him, though. Maybe he had enough sense to stay away. I'd go back to the trailer afterward, drink a couple beers, and pass out. I thought I'd have nightmares or something, but all I had were empty dreams with no shape, no color. That kind of nothingness felt worse than a nightmare, in a way. Eventually, I got a job here in town, part-time. Just enough to keep me busy, keep some money in my pocket. I didn't think about going back to the border. I had some leave time saved up, so I figured I'd use it. The days started blending. I'd get up, wash in the tiny shower stall, eat something, drive into town, do my shift, come back, maybe watch some old TV channels if the antenna picked them up. I became a ghost of myself, drifting from one place to another without purpose. I didn't see her. I didn't call. She didn't come by. Or if she did, I wasn't there. About a month after the night I found them, I came back to the trailer one evening and noticed an envelope stuck to the door. No return address, just my name in her handwriting. Inside was a single photo. A newborn baby, wrapped in a blanket. Her note on the back. Your son. I'm sorry. I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling a mix of shock and confusion. Because I did the math. The kid was early, way too early to be mine. 6.5 months after I left? My face went cold. I stepped inside, set the photo on the counter, and stared at it under the harsh overhead light. The baby was small, but not that small. The note said, "Your boy." But everything about it felt wrong. So I grabbed a calendar and my phone, started counting. Counted the weeks I'd been gone, counted backward to when he must have been conceived. None of it lined up with me. I'd been away far too long. There was no chance that kid was mine. I paced the trailer, the photo in my hand. My stomach was in knots. I was angry, confused, and something else, a weird sense of betrayal stacked on top of everything else. As if the affair wasn't enough, now she was handing me this baby? Did she honestly think I'd just accept that child was mine, or was she trying to wrap me back into her life out of guilt? It didn't make sense. But the next morning, I sucked it up and called her for the first time since I left. She sounded surprised, breathless. She asked if I'd received the picture. I said yes. Then I asked her straight, "Why'd you send it?" She hesitated. Then she started talking about regrets, about how she wanted me to see the baby, how she knew how important family was to me. Her voice cracked when she said, "He needs a father." That's when I said, "But he's not mine, is he?" She went silent. For a moment, I thought maybe the line had dropped. Then I heard her breathing, and she whispered, "He's Rick's. Rick, our neighbor. The guy who'd wave at me from across the fence sometimes, the guy who'd bring in our mail if we were gone." That was the voice in the bedroom. She said it was a one-time mistake, that it happened when she was lonely and upset, but she swore it wasn't going on for months. I wasn't sure I believed her. It didn't matter. The facts were what they were. The baby wasn't mine. She started crying, saying she was sorry, how she told him to stay away, how she was trying to make things right by telling me now. I let her talk until she ran out of words. Then I just said, "Okay," and hung up. Didn't shout, didn't argue. I sat in that trailer, phone on my lap, feeling something break inside all over again. That night, I stared at the photo of the boy until my eyes burned. I knew I'd never see him as my son. But I also felt a strange sorrow for him. This wasn't his fault. He was just born into this mess. I thought about how lonely it must be for her too, raising a child without the father around. Because from the sound of it, Rick wasn't stepping up. I told myself I wouldn't get involved. I was done. But I couldn't let it go that easy. Rage simmered under the surface. Every time I pictured Rick, I saw those boots in my hallway and his hand on her face. I needed some kind of closure or revenge, or something. I didn't know what. But 3 weeks later, I made my move. I spent those 3 weeks avoiding people, going to my part-time job, coming back to the trailer, fishing alone on the weekends. The lake near the trailer was small, barely more than a pond, but it had a few bass if you got lucky. I'd sit out there, watch the water, and think about Rick. That image haunted me, how comfortable he looked in my house, how he held her face like he owned it. I thought about the baby, the one with Rick's blood, not mine. The anger came in waves. One night I couldn't sleep. The idea hit me. I remembered this old property on the far side of town. It had a rundown house and a collapsed workshop in the back. My dad had talked about it years ago, said it was going cheap because nobody wanted to fix it up. I decided to drive by, see if the for sale sign was still there. It was. Weeds everywhere, rusted gate, broken windows. A perfect place to disappear for a while. The next morning, I made some calls, found out who owned it. I had some savings put aside, not a fortune, but enough to buy a place that was practically worthless. I signed papers the following week. People told me I was crazy. Maybe I was. But I didn't plan to live there. I just needed it for something. After I got the keys, I went to check the property more thoroughly. The house was old, smelled of rot, half the floorboards sagged. The workshop out back was mostly caved in, full of junk. But there was a basement underneath, with a heavy door. I checked it out, dark, musty, no electricity. The steps creaked, but they held my weight. I stood in that basement a long time, imagining. It felt like being in a tomb. A place where a man could scream, and nobody'd hear. That's when I decided to invite Rick over. I knew I had an old generator from my dad, which I'd stored in a friend's shed. Rick liked tools and equipment. I'd seen him fiddling with them. I wrote him a short message. Hey, I've got this old generator you might like. I'll be at that property off Highway 19. Need to get rid of it, don't want to haul it. Come by if you're interested. I mailed it in an envelope with no return address. That was enough. I had a feeling he'd show. Sure enough, a few days later, I was at the property, rummaging in the collapsed workshop, when I heard a truck on the gravel outside. My heart pounded. I set the piece of scrap metal I was holding onto the table. A minute later, he knocked on the front door, called my name. I told him to come around back. When he stepped into the yard, I finally got a good look at him in daylight. He looked uneasy, like he'd rather be anywhere else. We nodded at each other. No handshake. He tried to speak. Hey man. You, wanted me to see something? I just said. Generators in the basement. Let's go have a look. My voice was low, steady. Didn't give him a chance to back out. He glanced around, probably noticed how deserted the place was. But curiosity or greed got the better of him, and he followed. We went into the house, down the hall to the basement door. It was dark down there. I had a flashlight. Rick mumbled something about how the house looked like a real fixer-upper. I didn't respond. We descended the steps, the boards groaning under our weight. The basement smelled of wet concrete, mold, and old dust. In the corner, I had placed a shovel and a pickaxe. I said I was clearing out some debris, told him to watch his step. He walked closer, shining his phone's light around. Then I stepped back, went up the stairs, and slammed the basement door. I heard him shout, "Hey!" from below. I slid the bolt I'd installed that morning. The door locked tight. His voice rose, frantic. He banged on the door. "What the hell, man? Open up!" My hands were shaking, but I kept them on the bolt. I called through the door. "There's a pipe down there I need dug out. It's under a few feet of dirt. You're not coming out until you clear it." That wasn't exactly the truth, but it sounded plausible. He cursed, pounded on the door again. Then he fell silent for a second. I could almost feel the fear soaking through. "Good." After a minute he shouted, "You're insane! Let me out!" His voice cracked. I sat down on a stool I'd placed in the hallway and waited. Calm, or as calm as I could manage. My heart was hammering, but I told myself not to rush. Let him panic. Let him think about what he did. He tried the door again, rattling it. The wood groaned, but the bolt held. He kicked it. I heard the thud. Then I heard him pacing around below, his footsteps echoing. I half expected him to try the small basement windows, but they were sealed up with boards on the outside. He was stuck. For a few minutes, it was just silence. Then he started yelling for help. It wouldn't matter. There was nobody around to hear. Finally, I heard him pick up something, maybe the shovel. I heard scraping noises, like he was trying to dig. His voice was muffled, filled with rage and confusion. I just waited. Hours went by. My throat felt dry. I could smell my own sweat. Rick's voice had gone raw from shouting, then quiet. Every so often, I heard him cuss, cry out, whimper. He was breaking down. Good. That's what I wanted, to see him crumble. Late afternoon turned into evening. I unlocked the door once, cracked it an inch. Shone my flashlight in. He was hunched by a corner, covered in dirt and sweat. He squinted against the light. "What do you want from me?" he rasped. I said nothing. I just stared at him. The hate I felt was immense, but I also felt a twisted satisfaction seeing him like that. Then I closed the door again, locked it. He groaned, started begging. "Please! God, just let me out, man. We can talk." I stood there, my hand on the bolt, not moving. Let him sweat some more. Another hour passed. I heard scraping again. Maybe he really believed there was a pipe to dig up. Or maybe he was just desperate to do something. Around the 5-hour mark, I finally slid back the bolt and opened the door. I went down the steps slowly. He shielded his eyes from the flashlight, looked up at me like a terrified animal. He was filthy, his shirt torn, his cheeks streaked with tears and grime. The hole he dug wasn't much, just a shallow pit. The air reeked of damp earth and fear. He whimpered, "Please, please." I could barely make out the words. He was trembling. I stood above him, the flashlight beam centered on his face. A wave of disgust washed over me. Disgust at him, at myself, at everything. I expected to feel some triumph. Instead, I just felt tired. All I could see was a pathetic creature, not a proud neighbor who'd stolen my wife. This was the father of her child. I said nothing. I stepped aside, pointed toward the stairs. He stumbled to his feet, shovel clattering from his grip. When he realized I was letting him go, he practically crawled up the steps. I followed him, the flashlight making a jerky path on the walls. Once we were upstairs, he groped for the door to the outside, pushed through it. He gasped at the evening air like he'd been underwater too long. We stood in the yard, the moonlight showing his dirt-streaked face. He looked over at me, eyes wide with fear. I just stared back. He mumbled something like, "I'm sorry," then walked backward a few steps, tripped, got back up, and then made for his truck. I didn't try to stop him. He climbed in, fired up the engine, and tore off down the road, leaving a cloud of dust behind. I heard the echoes of the engine long after he was gone. I stood there until I could only hear crickets. My heart was pounding, my body shaking with adrenaline. But I didn't feel any relief. If anything, I felt emptier. I'd done what I did, and it didn't bring me peace. It just confirmed how twisted this whole mess was. I walked back into the house, locked it up. Spent the night there, listening to every creak and groan. I didn't bother with a bed, just spread a blanket on the floor. I kept seeing his face when I opened the door, how helpless he was. It didn't satisfy me like I thought it would. Morning came, pale light through filthy windows. I drove back to the trailer. Tried to wash some of the dirt off in the tiny shower. Couldn't get his voice out of my head, that frantic begging. I wondered if he'd call the cops. Maybe he was too ashamed or scared. Days went by. Nobody came knocking. Rumor had it he packed up and left town. Good. He wasn't my neighbor anymore. Life after that got simpler in some ways, lonelier in others. She tried to call me a few times, left messages I didn't bother answering. I knew I'd have to deal with the divorce eventually, but I wasn't in a hurry. I was still living in the trailer, burying my days in small tasks, fishing, occasionally having a beer with Wayne, a guy I've known since high school. He'd lost his wife to cancer a few years back. We didn't talk about our pain much. We just drank, swapped fishing stories, avoided heavy topics. It worked for us. Sometimes I'd see my wife in town, carrying groceries or pushing a stroller. She looked tired, older somehow. If she noticed me, she'd give this hesitant wave, but I never responded. I'd just keep walking or pretend not to see. I knew the baby was Rick's, but I heard people whisper that she was raising him alone. Rick never showed his face again. Maybe he was too scared. Or too humiliated. I kept busy fixing up the old property, half-heartedly. I'd tear down rotten boards, patch holes, but never did anything to make it truly livable. It was more like a place I went to burn off energy. I used the workshop for storage, never went back into that basement. It gave me the creeps. Reminded me too much of the night I locked Rick down there. Sleep was a problem. I'd fall into bed exhausted, but as soon as my eyes shut, I'd see them in my bed, the way he held her face. Or I'd see him in that basement, covered in dirt, eyes full of fear. I'd jolt awake, breathless. Drinking didn't help. So I just learned to deal with the fatigue. That's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't kill you, it just dulls you down to nothing. After a few months, I realized I was never going back to the house we shared. I didn't want it. The memories in that place were infected. So I stayed in the trailer. Sometimes I thought about how my life had shrunk to these four walls, a beat-up truck, and a handful of regrets. But I'd push those thoughts away. It was survival mode, day by day. One afternoon, Wayne and I were out by the lake, rods in the water, not talking much. He asked, "You still love her?" That question made me flinch. I stared at my bobber, which wasn't moving. I couldn't answer him. Finally I said, "I don't feel anything." That was the truth. Rage had turned into numbness. Hurt had turned into emptiness. Maybe deep down, something was still there, but I couldn't reach it. Wayne just nodded and cast his line again. That was that. I started thinking about applying for a transfer, maybe moving to another region. The job on the border had been my life for 8 years, but it felt tainted now, like everything else. I didn't know if I wanted to keep patrolling, keep living in that routine. Every day felt like a countdown to something I couldn't identify. I kept drifting. Over time, I heard she was living off some support from her sister. The baby was a healthy boy, so the rumor went. People said he had dark hair, big eyes, but they all said he looked nothing like me. I'd see folks do a double take when they realized I wasn't the father. Gossip is a local sport in a small town. I didn't bother correcting them. Let them talk. I guess she got used to single motherhood. Maybe she found some kind of peace in it. I never found out. I wasn't part of that story anymore. Once or twice, I'd get a text from an unknown number, just a picture of the baby. I assumed it was her. I'd delete it without opening. I knew it would just tear open wounds that wouldn't heal properly. So I kept ignoring it, burying myself in work, the trailer, the lonely property I'd bought. Meanwhile, I never truly processed what I'd done to Rick. The memories stuck to me like tar. Sometimes I'd see a shovel and flash back to him in the basement. But I couldn't bring myself to feel remorse. I hated him. He'd destroyed what little trust one had left in this world. If scaring him half to death made him leave, so be it. That was my logic at the time. As for her, I still had moments where I replayed it all. The night I came home, the boots in the hall, the hush in the bedroom. But the more time passed, the more it felt like I was numb. Pain scabs over, leaves a scar. You remember you got hurt, but you don't feel the sting the same way. It's just a dull ache, a stiffness that never quite goes away. That was how my heart felt. I wish I could say there was a big final scene, a confrontation where we hashed it all out. But it didn't happen that way. Life just kept stumbling forward. She was alone now, raising a son who looked nothing like me. I was in my father's trailer, minding my own business. Weeks slipped into months. I'd pass her on the road sometimes. We'd exchange a brief glance. That was all. One evening, I found myself parked outside the old house we used to share. I was half drunk, not proud to say it, but it was the truth. I just stared at the porch light. I remembered when we first moved in, how excited she was to paint the walls, hang curtains, make it a home. Now it was just a place that belonged to my past. I felt the weight of everything we'd lost. Didn't matter whose fault it was, the fact remained, it was gone. I finally started the truck and drove away, not looking back. Days later, I dropped by Wayne's place for a drink. He told me rumors that Rick had sold his property and skipped town. Maybe moved out west. Good riddance. I felt a small relief, as if the last piece of that puzzle had been removed. It didn't fix anything, but it ended the possibility of running into him around here. One less ghost roaming my life. Eventually, I started divorce proceedings. We met at the lawyer's office once, barely spoke. She signed the papers, tears in her eyes. I kept my gaze on the table. The lawyer asked a few questions, we answered in short sentences. Then I walked out. That was the final break on paper. For me, the real break happened the day I saw those boots. I settled into a routine that felt nothing like living, more like existing. I'd fish in the mornings, sometimes drive to the edge of town for a cheap breakfast. I'd talk to Wayne or a few acquaintances about sports or fishing or the weather. But I never told them the truth about what I felt inside. Didn't seem worth it. People can't fix that for you. One afternoon, out of the blue, she showed up at the trailer. I heard a soft knock, opened the door, and there she stood with the baby in her arms. He had big, curious eyes, looked about a year old by then. She must have figured I'd want to see him. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, looked at him. The kid reached out with his little hand, but I stepped back, shook my head. She tried to speak, voice trembling. He should know you. Even if... I raised a hand, stopping her. I couldn't. The memory of that night, her and Rick, still hung in the air. The baby wasn't mine, and I couldn't pretend. She started crying, trying to talk, but I just stood there, silent. Finally, she left, tears streaming down her face. The baby started whimpering in her arms. I watched them walk away until they disappeared behind the truck. For a moment, I felt guilt. Maybe it wasn't the kid's fault, but I couldn't force myself to play dad when every fiber of me screamed no. I closed the door, locked it, stared at the old pictures on the wall. Pictures of me and my dad, me in uniform, me and her on our wedding day. I realized that ring was long gone now, cut in half and jammed into a bar of soap. I wondered if she kept that piece. Or maybe she threw it out. Either way, the promise it represented was dead. People say time heals all wounds, but I don't think that's true. Time just numbs them, covers them with scar tissue. You go on living, but you're never quite the same. I found a kind of rhythm in my days, a dull pattern that kept me occupied. Nights were harder, with memories creeping in. I'd see her face in my mind, hear those whispers in the bedroom. I'd picture Rick's terror in the basement, or the baby's small hand reaching out. It all blurred together into one big ache. I never moved back to the border. I resigned eventually. Filed the paperwork. I'd had enough of that life. Instead, I took odd jobs around town, mowing lawns, fixing fences, helping folks with small construction tasks. My father's trailer became a permanent home of sorts. Didn't bother renovating it. The leaks, the creaks, they all became normal to me. Sometimes I'd spend a weekend at the old house property I bought, but it felt haunted. The basement made my skin crawl. So mostly I stayed away. I hardly spoke to her after that day. Once in a while, I'd see her at the grocery store, the kid toddling next to her. She'd meet my eyes for a second, and I'd give a slight nod, nothing more. She looked drawn, like a woman who'd cried too many nights. But what was there to say? People in town, if they knew the full story, they didn't bring it up. Maybe they saw the look in my eyes and decided not to pry. That's the thing about a small town. They gossip behind your back, but to your face, they'd put on a show of politeness. Fine by me. I didn't want to talk anyway. Time passed. The kid must have grown. I never asked. I never held him or spoke to him. I know that might make me a bad man in some people's eyes, but I couldn't forge a connection that wasn't there. I still felt that wave of disgust when I pictured Rick with her, and that overshadowed anything else. Maybe that's selfish, but it's the truth. So I lived, day after day, numb, broken, yet functional. Wayne and I still fish sometimes. We don't talk about serious stuff. We just comment on the water, on the bait, on the weather. At night, when I'm alone in the trailer, I sometimes think about how simple my life was before all this. How a single moment, coming home 3 days early, changed everything. But there's no going back. I used to think I'd grow old with her, retire, maybe move somewhere sunny. We'd watch grandkids play in the yard. That dream is gone. Now I just float through, do my jobs, catch a fish once in a while, drink a few beers, and try not to dwell on what I saw. But in the dark, I still see it. The images don't fade, they just get quieter. They're buried under layers of time, but they don't vanish. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choices. Smashing his truck, pouring diesel, scaring him in that basement. Maybe it was too far, maybe it wasn't far enough. But I accept it. I can't change it now. We live with our decisions. That's what being a man is, carrying the weight of what you've done, right or wrong, and moving forward. I'm not angry anymore. At least not like I was. That anger burned itself out, left me with ashes. I don't even feel betrayal as a sharp pain. It's more like a dull ache I carry in my chest. Sometimes I think if I'd known I wasn't the baby's father from the start, maybe I would have been spared some heartbreak. But that's not how life works. It's messy. So that's it. That's the story. I wish I had a neat ending, but I don't. She's still in that house, I guess, raising the boy. He's not mine, and he knows that, maybe not now, but he'll figure it out eventually. Rick's gone, out of state, as far as I know. And me, I'm here in this trailer, on the edge of town. I fish. I wake up. I do small jobs. Sometimes I share a drink with Wayne, who never asks questions. And that's how days go by. If you asked me if I'm happy, I wouldn't know how to answer. I'm surviving. I don't talk about it. I don't want sympathy or judgment. Maybe in another life, I would have screamed and fought and tried to fix it all. But this is what happened. It's behind me now. You live on day by day, just with fewer feelings than you used to have. That's the honest truth of it. That's all I've got to say.